Chapter 1. Phone pressed to her ear, Rebecca wove through the crowded New York sidewalk, desperate to find a newsstand. The cool September breeze chilled the light perspiration evaporating off her skin as she walked. A sweater would have been perfect, but there hadn't been time. Whatever prompted her best friend to force her out of the house to buy a magazine better be good. Barbara was flipping her lid, and that's saying a lot for a lawyer known for keeping her calm in court. Rebecca maneuvered around a woman bending over her navy stroller to pop a squeaky pacifier back into her baby's mouth. Barbara wouldn't quell so easily. "Some things must be seen to be believed," she said. But what things? What was she talking about? Before Barbara yanked her from her lazy Saturday afternoon, Rebecca was elbow-deep in an epic pruning session on her crinkly houseplants. Kyle, her boyfriend, loafed on the couch engrossed in a Yankees game. Now, Rebecca found herself weaving through Manhattan sidewalks, looking like a harried tourist. "How long does it take to get to a newsstand?" Barbara said. "I'm practically running. The 2 newsstands I remembered are bike lanes now." When had she last held a magazine, cracked the spine to enjoy the glossy pages inside? Not since college. Back then, she bought GQ to hang pictures of hot guys on the ceiling over her bed. She'd lay in bed for hours, getting lost in their chiseled features and dreamy expressions. Too bad they were the closest she got to the male species at the time. The crosswalk blinked "Don't walk" as she arrived at the corner. A herd of taxis accelerated up the avenue, darting around slower vehicles and causing near catastrophes. Rebecca's prize stood across the street, a green metal shed covered in latticework. Colorful magazines hung from clips on every topic imaginable: fashion, motorsports, health, news, commentary, Sudoku puzzles. But, like the New York Times, they were waif-like shadows of their former beefy selves. As a kid, schlepping the Sunday Times home for her dad required a forklift. No more. Digital ruled, which made this panic stroll into the print realm that much more ridiculous. Rebecca rubbed away the chill settling into her idle arms. "Can't you just tell me? What's this obsession with me buying Maud? You must hold the magazine in your hands, and you'll be glad I'm with you when you do." The walk light flashed, and Rebecca trotted across, spotting the pink cover of Maud among the other fashion titles. This special issue ballooned to 3 times the size of Vogue, with "Our Favorites" stamped across the cover. Rebecca handed her credit card to the guy and started flipping through the glossy title. "What page?" "The spread isn't numbered, but look 3 pages past 187. "Way to make it easy." "Hey, complain to the publisher. I'm only a patron. How else am I supposed to see which color is coming next season? Be like every other New Yorker and wear black." Barbara sighed. "We need to address your wardrobe. But that's a conversation for another day. When I make lawyer money like you, we can talk about my wardrobe." Rebecca pocketed her credit card and stepped away to lean on a car and flip, while the next shopper bought a roll of peppermint Mentos and the New York Daily News. Unnumbered pages with ads made it hard to find her reference pages, but soon 187 flashed by, and 3 pages later... Rebecca gasped. It couldn't be. Was it? No way. She looked up for confirmation that she hadn't shifted to an alternate reality, but the surly man waiting to pay for gum gave her a nasty look. Yeah, same reality. The thumbs on the woman behind him flew so fast on her smartphone, Rebecca wanted to yank the device away. How could she text at a time like this? Rebecca's world just flipped upside down. She reached for the solidness of the car behind her. If not for that, she would have swooned. "This is why I needed to be with you," Barbara said from the phone cradled in her neck. "How is this even possible?" Rebecca asked. "I don't know how he got in Maud, but the story must be juicy as hell." There he was. Kyle. Her boyfriend who wore nothing but t-shirts and jeans, wrapped in a bulky cream sweater with chunky tan buttons. Instead of his trademark Fruit of the Loom, he wore a pricey outfit by designer Calvin Klein. In the 2-page spread, Kyle leaned against a barkless branch with the sharpest, longest thorns Rebecca had ever seen. Scary sharp. Had he gotten cut doing the pictures? What was she saying? Kyle's face splashed across the world's top fashion magazine, looking like someone who belonged on a dorm room ceiling. His glossy dark hair, blue eyes, and tan skin silhouetted against a cloudless blue sky. But none of it made any sense. What the hell is Kyle doing in Mod? No clue, but go search for Kyle Dillon Model and prepare to be blown away. Rebecca jammed the magazine under her arm and palmed her phone to search. Sure enough, Kyle's photo results page filled every tile. No random pics mixed in to test whether you were paying attention. All Kyle. Every one. Magazine pictures, runway pictures, red carpet in a tux. This was nuts. You still there? Barbara asked. Barely, Rebecca answered. How could he not have told me? This is so big. He must have modeled for, what, years? He'd better have a good reason to keep something this big a secret, Barbara said. Rebecca reopened the magazine. The picture dated from 11 years prior, yet it ranked as a favorite. Kyle rated good enough for someone to put it in a roundup of favorite shots, yet he'd never mentioned being a model in the 8 months they'd been dating and the 3 months they'd lived together. But why? Rebecca hung up and headed back to the apartment. What would she say to Kyle? What did it say about their relationship that he hadn't yet told her? The two of them bubbled along without incident since he moved in, all smiles and good times. But they obviously weren't as close as she had assumed. Ouch! Rebecca yelled as she walked into a parking meter. She looked around, but no one noticed. And why would they? She could lie dead in the middle of the street, and distracted New Yorkers would step around her. They'd probably tell her to die somewhere more convenient next time. Lucky for them, confusion wasn't fatal. Though, in her case, it might be. Basketballs careened off the backboard of the courts in front of their apartment, sneaker squeaks echoing off the surrounding buildings. Her eyes found their third-floor apartment window. Inside, Kyle sat watching sports. Meanwhile, his face splashed across the pages of Maud. She took a seat on a park bench. In the 8 months they'd been together, they'd been through a lot. When first together, Rebecca had secrets of her own. Shedding enough shame to come clean took time, but she did. Kyle now knew everything there was to know about 29-year-old Rebecca Sloan. Her warts, her crazy parents out on Long Island, her history of less than stellar bedroom performance. And he loved her anyway. Why didn't he trust her enough to share his past life? So he modeled. Big deal. Actually, it was a hella big deal. But why the secrecy? Every time Rebecca tried to talk about Kyle's college years, he'd change the subject. There's nothing to tell, he'd say. My life is boring compared to most people. I'm gonna hit the bathroom. Pass the salt. He'd been a master evader. But the time for diversions was over. Barbara rightly said some things must be seen for yourself. Now that she had, there was no unseeing. She stood up, exhaled the tension knotting her chest, and headed towards her lobby door. Chapter 2. The apartment door slammed, jarring Kyle out of his TV-induced stupor. You went out? Kyle lowered his legs off the coffee table and sat up. Yeah. He patted the sofa next to him for Rebecca to sit. This pitcher's duel is amazing. We should get tickets and go before the season ends. Or maybe your dad can spot us a pair of his season tickets. It might even get your mom off his case for never going in person." He reached for his beer, wiping the bottle's dewy condensation on his jeans before taking a long swig. Rebecca picked up the remote and shut off the TV. "Hey, what did you do that for?" Kyle reached for the remote, but a magazine slammed down on top of it. A magazine open to a spread. His spread. Kyle flipped the magazine closed, fanning the cloying smell of perfume ads in his face. His stomach churned. No amount of faux fragrance would mask the boatload of shit about to hit the fan. "Why didn't you tell me? What reason could you have to keep this from me all this time?" Rebecca said. Her dreamy pools of brown steeled in a way he'd never seen them, like she'd stepped into a cage match and was waiting for a competitor to throttle. Kyle opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. They got stuck somewhere between his bone-dry mouth and overactive brain, unable to compose a coherent thought. He'd only himself to blame. His past was bound to come seeping into their present sooner or later. It was a mistake to pretend it wouldn't. Infinite opportunities to tell her came and went. But none of that mattered now. Someone forced his hand. Or a specific someone, rather. Rebecca's jaw flexed. "Well?" "I'm so sorry. I don't talk about it. To anyone." "So your whole family knows? And Vivian? No one thought to mention it." "They wanted me to tell you myself. But even they don't know everything. Not really." "I'm sorry, but this makes no sense. Why is this such a big secret?" Kyle hung his head. Would he fit under the table? "Please, look at me," she said. "Must I?" "Yes." Thinking of his modeling days made his insides churn with a mix of anger, fear, and revulsion. The people, the fakery, the broken promises and shattered dreams. How could he make her understand? Kyle's legs gave out as he rose, sending Rebecca lurching to steady him. Recovering under her watchful gaze, he made his way to the kitchen, where he turned on the faucet to splash his face. Rebecca followed, standing at a distance in the doorway. "Whatever it is, you can tell me. I won't tell anyone, but you have to let me in." Water dripped down his chin onto his shirt, the blue fabric darkening into wet spots. Those marks would fade in an hour. He'd been waiting for his modeling scars to evaporate for 11 years. He dried his face on a paper towel and tossed it in the trash before meeting her gaze. "This summer, I shared the most intimate and painful secrets I had with you," she said. "I cried. You accepted me, faults and all. Why won't you trust me enough to do the same?" He sighed. "I trust you. Of course I trust you." "No, you don't. If you did, I wouldn't have learned about your past career from a magazine." Silence hung as her eyes implored him on. She loved him. He knew that. So why was this so hard? Once he started talking, it might all come tumbling out, the whole nasty pile of garbage. She would never look at him the same way once she knew. "Kai, come on." "Give me a minute," he said. Kyle bent into the chill of the fridge, the cool air prickling his damp skin to attention, awakening him from his long slumber. He could do this, but liquid courage was in order. Grabbing a brown bottle, he twisted off the bottle cap and downed 3/4 of the Sam Adams with long gulps before grabbing another. The fridge door swung shut, and he returned to the sofa where Rebecca sat, twirling her hair. "I guess we should call this our confession couch," he joked. Rebecca pulsed an eyebrow. "Your turn, this time." Kyle nodded, downing the last of his first beer. She reached over to rub his shoulder. "I'll try to be as understanding as you were with my bedroom challenges." "Past bedroom challenges," Kyle said with a crooked smile. When they first met, Rebecca harbored so much shame for her inability to climax in bed that she kept him at arm's length for months. But with help and love, she worked it through, gaining so much confidence and empowerment that it overflowed into all areas of her life. He could use a dose of that positive mojo right about now. "If I can admit that," Rebecca said, "you can share whatever you think is so terrible." Their eyes met, but he looked away. She crawled over, nudging into the crook of his arm. "It's just me. I can do this. So why can't I breathe?" "I don't want you to think less of me," he said. "I would never. I love you. Just start at the beginning." Kyle's heart was racing more than before his first show in Milan. That day he nearly blacked out, or did technically black out. After the show, he had no memory of walking down the runway, doing 2 wardrobe changes, and filing around for the end-of-show review. Here it goes. I was working as an apprentice to a photographer senior year in high school. One day, on an industrial photo shoot, someone on the set worked for a modeling agency. She took candid pictures of me and circulated them to her modeling contacts. Apparently, scouting for male models was fierce. Kyle paused, but her sweet smile urged him on. There was a flurry of interest in me. 4 agents approached for representation. 4. I couldn't believe it. My dad checked them out, and all were legit. We took some pictures, and they came out great. So I signed with an agency. That's amazing. You must have been thrilled. I was. It wasn't anything I ever wanted. Then suddenly I wanted it more than anything. My parents were pissed, but I deferred college for a few years until I left modeling. That freed me to do all sorts of jobs. But once I got booked as an underwear model, that sort of stuck. Bookings rolled in, so that was my job. I modeled professionally. Rebecca wore a broad smile, shaking her head in disbelief. That's incredible! To think that I've been living with a model for all this time. This is crazy. Kyle's heart plummeted through the floor. Those words. Hearing those words come out of her mouth justified his instincts to keep this part of him hidden. That's why I didn't tell you. What? What did I say? You didn't even realize. But now that you know, I'm no longer Kyle, your boyfriend. I'm the male model. An object. A thing. Worry swept her face. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean... It's not your fault. But that's why I don't tell people. No one looks at me the same way once they find out. Especially that I did underwear? Christ. It's impossible not to look at me like a piece of meat and imagine me practically naked. Well, I don't need to imagine, she said, with mischief in her eyes. Yeah, for you it's okay. But for everyone else, my clients, I can't have everyone knowing. There are colleagues in the industry who know, but the worst I get sometimes is a pair of underwear stuffed in my camera bag. No way. Yes, way. Richie will do it, but not too many others. She huffed a laugh before refocusing. So, what was it like? Was it fantastic? Kyle stood and walked to the window, scenes from his past playing in his mind. Sometimes, yes. It was an unreal dream. To be traveling around the world, seeing places and meeting famous people, powerful people. He grabbed his head with both hands, turning away. It always came back to it, to her. She was inextricably woven into his modeling experience. He couldn't talk about it without her hovering over him like a dark shadow he couldn't shake. Kyle, what's the matter? I've never said this out loud, not to anyone. Said what? Please, just tell me. He squeezed his eyes shut, pulse throbbing. I thought she had good intentions, but I was too young and stupid to know better. Who? Someone powerful took an interest in me. I thought it was genuine. I thought she saw something good in me and wanted to help my career. One word from her, and designers snapped to attention. They began calling to book me for runway shows and magazine shoots around the world. My family was super excited, and so was I. "It sounds like there's a but coming," Rebecca said. After a while, she expected favors. As soon as Kyle spoke the words, he was back there, back in her apartment, on the brown leather sofa with the animal print throw blanket that smelled like the imported coconut oil she rubbed on him before. Then her voice was in his head, exiting through his mouth. She said, "Didn't I like her? Didn't I appreciate everything she'd done to get me ahead? Didn't I find her attractive? Didn't I feel lucky to have all the doors she'd opened for me? Did I want them all to close?" Rebecca stood up and crossed the room to embrace Kyle from behind, but he flinched at her touch, stepping away. "I didn't want the doors to close, not by a long shot. So I gave in. I let her have me. It made her so happy, but I rotted inside. I'd rush home after and wash so hard I'd have red marks for days. I'd tell myself what we did was okay. I should be flattered, right? I'm a guy. Why didn't I feel flattered?" Rebecca's tears garbled her voice. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." She turned him to face her, grabbing his shoulders. "This is not your fault. Do you hear me? It isn't. I let it go on for months. I let her help me get jobs. I'd get on set, and they'd slather me with that same fucking coconut oil, and I'd want to throw up. But I had to look pretty, sexy. Then I'd get dressed and go with her to events. Everyone thought we were together, but we never were, Rebecca. I promise. Not really. I never wanted it. I swear. But once it started, I didn't know how to get out. She threatened to say I raped her if I told anyone." "Oh, sweetie." She wrapped him in her arms, his head resting against hers. He'd held it in for so long. Having it out circulating in the air in the room filled it with a dark energy, ghosts of his past packing the room. But they were out now. He'd told someone and didn't implode. Even better, he stood wrapped in the arms of a woman who loved him. Still. Kyle inhaled Rebecca in, a mix of spice and floral shampoo, as unique to her as much as the dark curls tickling his nose. He hugged her tight. "I didn't know what to do." "How did you get away?" "It's fuzzy, but somehow that night I got drunk and took some pills. Her driver dropped me half dead in an emergency room. I never heard from her again." Rebecca said nothing. What could she say to a bombshell like that? But with soothing strokes to his back, she communicated more through touch than words could ever express. Her arms squeezed tight, willing her strength into him. Salty tears ran into his mouth. Then it was as if his whole body began crying, not just his eyes. It came from deep recesses, from the roots of his hair, from his muscles, from his fingertips, shuddering his body as sobs escaped. A decade of pain crumbling the fortress of stone he'd erected to keep it all in, keep it contained, to forge ahead as if nothing happened, as if it was okay. But it wasn't. It wasn't okay. The touching, the oils, the total control. Emotion crashed through Kyle in waves as memories surfaced, then receded as an ocean of tears washed the tension away, cleansing his shame. It kept coming and coming. Now that he'd started, he couldn't stop himself. Rebecca held fast, stroking his head, saying he'd be okay. Kyle wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe he could get past it all, to feel normal again, to feel as he did before it ever happened, to regain that lightness, that freedom of spirit that the cameras captured. But could he? Could he do it? maybe he could. The time had come for him to try.